Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this UASs webinar on doctoral education at universities of applied science, which is a growing subject of interest in many countries. And we have three cases of that uh, to tell you about today. Not only, of course, for the institutions and the students themselves, but also for the companies and for other external stakeholders, which University of Applied Sciences work very closely with. In case you don't know who UASI is, it's the European Association for the Applied Sciences in Higher Education. It represents over 500 higher education institutions in the European higher education area, and we have affiliate members also from other parts of the world. Members are mostly called Universities of Applied Science, but there are other names for institutions that essentially have the same profile. We also have comprehensive universities as members that have departments that are dedicated to the applied sciences, professional higher education. But if you'd like to learn more about UASI, you can go to our website and find out about all the activities that we do, the opportunities that you can have by being involved in UASI, including, for example, the annual conference that is coming up on the 14th and 15th of May in Portugal. Still time to register. But I'm not going to say anything else because we have a lot to get through. We have three speakers, and thank you already to those speakers for agreeing to be a part of this webinar. And I'm going to pass over straight away to Johanna Krape from the University of Applied Sciences in Turku, and she's going to give the general introduction on the subject. So thank you, Johanna. It's over to you.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Turku, from Finland. We first thought that I could also be speaking about the Finnish situation, but there's not so much to tell about that because we are still in the phase where universities of applied sciences don't have the doctoral degree rights, but we are in that policy situation where we are working with universities to give collaborative doctorates. And that's why I am giving a bit of an overview of what is going on. How is the EQAF 8 as the framework for UAS doctoral education? And then Michael and Dan will give presentations from Germany and from the Netherlands. And hopefully you will write down some questions to the chat and we can discuss after approximately half an hour. So what have been the drivers for UASs to develop the third cycle education and the whole UAS sector? So behind, of course, are the labor market demands for skilled workforce. And as you can probably know from the EU documentation, there are several discussions where it is seen that universities don't maybe provide students with those skills that the labor market needs, and UASs try more to answer to that. Massification has been the case in different countries, not all, and we will hear more about it from the German perspective from Michael. And then, of course, the different cities, Bologna, Lisbon, and Salzburg, that are behind the reforms in the higher education in Europe. In some fields, the academization has been important, like from social work to from the first to second to the third cycle. And a big thing is the so-called mission shift and the academic and practice drifts. And these, of course, mean that the mission shift is the idea is that we have been at universities of applied sciences earlier only teaching universities and very practice oriented. That has been the education has been based on research, and now we have changed to the direction where we do the original applied research. And the academic and practice drifts describe how universities of applied sciences have been converging universities in academic sense and universities converging to universities of applied sciences in their more practice-based type of research or education. So we are coming more closer together. And there is, of course, the question of permeability, where we have to think about from bachelor's to master's, EQAF 7, and then to the EQAF 8. And this, of course, causes some challenges to the binary or dual systems that we have in Europe. Let's go already further, and everybody probably knows the European qualification framework and the descriptors that you can see here. So how do the universities of applied sciences approach these ones, and how do universities? If you look into these closely, you can see that we are working at the most advanced frontier of field or of work, for instance. And in the skills section, it is said that we at EQAF 8 level, students need to are required to solve critical problems in research and or innovation. And then the professional practice is also mentioned there. In the responsibility and autonomy, there is also at the forefront of work or study. So now the next question is, how do we approach these descriptors from the universities of applied sciences point of view? And there are several ways to do that. And what is the status of this EQAF 8 level at universities of applied sciences in Europe? In German, already 12 out of 16 states have given doctoral degree awarding rights to UASs, starting from Fulda UAS 2016. And they have the more applied research doctorate going on there. While in the Netherlands, there is the pilot going on with this professional doctorates since 2023. And Dan will talk more about that. But 25 out of 36 universities of applied sciences are participating in the 7 different domains there. And on the other end are the Portuguese. The Portuguese polytechnicos have taken up research doctorates and industrial doctorates since 2024. And they have clearly very much the emphasis on the research. So they are having the same accreditation criteria and evaluation criteria as do the universities. So there are no differences between them. And then there are several countries that are very active in collaborative doctorates, such as the Swiss and Austrians have collaborative doctorates where there is also funding available. And then there is Finland that doesn't have funding from the ministry for these collaborative doctorates, where universities are giving the doctoral degrees. And in Finland, we've started the higher education policy discussions last year, and it is quite heated discussion at the moment. And then there are several other EU member states that are in different stages on the higher education and political agenda. And in all these countries, it looks like we have similarities in the policy debates that take place before the doctoral degree rights are given. Please, Michael, next one. Yes. So the EQAF8 spectrum, we've thought about it as threefolded. So there are the research doctorates, that the history and where the universities mostly lie on. And then coming from there, we have UASs that have more applied research doctorates. And then clearly the professional doctorates, as the Netherlands have. And next one is describing a bit on the ways of approaches to the research. Do we do application-based, application-related, application-oriented, applied, practice-oriented, transformative, or what is the basis of the research that we do? And well, this is a very interesting question, and I think that we will come back to that after the presentations. But next, Michael give a presentation of how Germans are doing the doctorates at UASs.
Yes, thank you, Johanna, for the introduction and for giving an overview of the different aspects and dimensions that play a role here. Well, I'm Michael Giller. I'm professor here in Hamburg in Germany, and I'm responsible here for the Doctoral Center in Hamburg. And we have just 2 months ago, but actually just 6 weeks ago, been awarded the right to award doctorates in a specific model that is one among others here in Germany. And I would like you in the next 10 minutes briefly fill you in on how Germany approached the question of doctorates for UASs and the applied research doctorate that is the dominating model here in Germany for UASs. Just brief catch up on what happened. Of course, what the situation is in Germany. We do have a binary system, so we have universities and we have universities of applied sciences. The before mentioned massification in Germany has led to a situation where now we have 1.1 million students enrolled in study programs in UASs in Germany, in contrast to just roughly 1.6, 1.7 million in research universities. So this is quite a number. And in terms of permeability, we have an issue in Germany with UAS graduates with a bachelor, with a master, not being able to move on as easily as traditional university graduates to move on to EQFA to a doctorate. Of course, the number is by far not as large as in traditional universities, but still there are some, and there have been difficulties for universities to open up to the US graduates in this regard. Over the decades, we see a mission shift or a mission evolution from originally in the 70s, like I think in most European countries, more vocationally oriented or education, to what we see now, an autonomous development of applied sciences. And actually in the course of introducing the degree awarding rights, in most of the higher education acts, the role of UASs is redefined as being in charge of autonomously developing the sciences, but applied sciences. So there's still a specification here present. Just another background, I think this is also very similar to other European countries, but professors here need 5 years of work experience. They need a doctorate plus work experience, 5 years, and 3 years of which at least 3 years outside higher education system. We have strong ties to the industry, to non-industry partners. And what is an issue in Germany, maybe more than in other countries, is an academization of disciplines, which took place at UASs, for example, in nursing, the before mentioned social work, but also midwifery, for example. So many different disciplines have no study program at universities, but only at universities of applied sciences. And of course, what was the last main driver for development here, of course, was the Bologna process, introducing bachelor and master's programs. Now, the doctorate and we've seen the spectrum on one of the slides of Johanna just now, and what kind of doctorate are UASs in Germany offering or supposed to offer? And this somewhat relates to also the evaluation practice of the German Science and Humanities Council, the so-called Wissenschaftsrat, which is basically a body that is tasked with evaluation and accreditation, and also delivers opinions on the development of the higher education system in Germany. And they have already evaluated 2 UAS doctoral programs here. And they have basically developed also a certain notion of what the US doctorate is supposed to look like. And in most of the states in Germany, they by and large follow this approach. And the idea is, okay, it's the same and it's equivalent to university doctorates, but it is still somewhat different in its application orientation. We do have the same title, so there's no difference here. So there's no addition to the title that it's of UAS origin. There's no differentiation made here. But it is still supposed to operate in this dichotomy of basic research and applied research, whatever you might want to think of that distinction. So it's definitely more practice and application oriented when it comes to UASs, although it is recognized that the distinction between basic and applied research often makes little sense. The applied research doctorate is different in that, okay, we do have the same theories, we have the same scientific methods, but it's supposed to be different in terms of research perspectives. So same and equivalent, but different perspectives. It's a matter of discussion, of course, what exactly that means, and we are supposed to find that out as UASs to somehow define our role, also different from universities. We are supposed to do research that is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and what we also have for UASs in Germany, and this holds for, in my observation for all cases, we have curricular components that are an integral part of the doctoral trajectory. So this is roughly the applied doctorate. Of course, there are differences depending on the German state that you look at. As we said, there are already 12 states out of the 16 that have doctorates for UASs. Now, some program characteristics, of course, systematic level binary system is upheld. At institutional level, what is required? We need research environment, usually interdisciplinarily defined. We have a certain program level autonomy. And just as a footnote here, traditionally, it is the faculty that is the legal body entitled to award doctorates. This is different for UASs, so there were also technical issues here to be resolved at institutional level here. We have institutional critical mass requirements, so we need to define a domain, which is usually a theme or problem-oriented, not so much disciplinary oriented, and we need a minimum number of professors. So we have a head count, and this basically deviates from whichever region you look at in Germany. This deviates between 6 and 14 so far, but usually, in fact, it is already more in each case. And at individual level, who is actually has the right to award or to supervise and assess doctorates, but this is still a relatively small number. You need a certain research track here, publications plus third-party funding, competitive funding. And of course, you need to fit into the domain that has been defined here. So these are some of the issues that we are discussing here different levels in Germany, and which are still in an experimental phase with many of these criteria here. And we have basically this is very formal, 3 implementation models, which maybe 4. One is we're together with the universities, but we have umbrella structures, which we have in North Rhine-Westphalia and Baden-Württemberg, where more than 20 UASs in each case basically operate a central institution that has the degree awarding rights. Then we have more decentral approaches where the UASs themselves award the degrees, sometimes collaborating with others in certain domains. And we have then a very specific model here in Hamburg where we have just one UAS, one big UAS being eligible to award doctorates. So that is it from my side here from Germany. If you want to hear more about this, of course, there's also a Russia conference in Porto Alegre in May. So in case you want to hear more here about this, apart from the discussion we're going to have, feel free to join us there. But I would hand over to Dan now to learn more about the Dutch model.
Yes, Dan, excuse me to jump in. Michael, before we go to you, Dan, I would try and keep it as interactive as possible. I would like to ask Iris Grunenberg, if she's there, to ask her question out loud, because she has her hand up. If it was a correct hand raised, otherwise we'll move on. Iris, are you there? No, okay. So it was it wasn't a correct hand. So anyway, you can, everybody, raise your hand if you wish to ask a question out loud. Otherwise, you can also put it in the chat or the Q&A. So sorry, Dan, false alarm. Okay, there she is. False alarm. We'll move now over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well, I'm very excited to share some of the insights from the Dutch pilot project on the professional doctorate. I'm a professor at Utrecht University of Applied Sciences in the field of research competence. And together with a number of people, we've been working now for almost 6 years to develop a professional doctorate at the Universities of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. We have a binary system here in the Netherlands with about 36 universities of applied sciences, in contrast to the 15 research universities that we have. And in contrast to Germany, we have about 1.5 times the number of students as the research universities, about almost 450,000 students. So we are quite a big player in the higher education system in the Netherlands, with a strong focus on professional education. And as in Germany, we have had a strong development in the recent 25 years, from being more or less an education factory to a knowledge institution, often with strong ties in the region. And for 25 years, we've been investing strongly in a research function within our universities of applied sciences, which has resulted in over 700 professors now working in these institutions, working on practice-based research. We are also enlarging our education portfolio, especially from the bachelor to the field of the master degree. There are a number of University of Applied Sciences now with own master degrees, either funded or non-funded by the government. And there's an increase in lifelong learning activities. And all of these are focusing not so much at academization of the profession, as well the innovation of the profession. And I'll come back to that difference in a moment. Next slide, Michael. Because when I first started to look into level 8 education in 2018, I was struck by the formulation of these descriptors, especially that it seems that we have, as Universities of Applied Sciences, we have sort of 2 options or 2 flavors, if you like. And in red, I've highlighted what we have decided to focus on within the Netherlands. So it's either or knowledge at the most advanced frontier of work or study. So that means that a professional doctorate can also not only focus on research, but have a primarily focus on the profession itself, the work. The same with skills. It's required that there is research and or innovation. So it could be a professional doctorate that's solely focusing on innovation of a particular practice and a particular field, and not so much as in Germany, focusing on the research. And the same with responsibility and autonomy. Also, there's the option for the development of new ideas and processes as the forefront of work. So if you consider this as being two flavors, then you could either have a research-focused doctorate, or you could have a transformation or innovation-focused doctorate. And that's the flavor that we have chosen in the Netherlands. Next slide. And the reason is that we had to negotiate with the research universities about level 8 education at universities of applied sciences. And we sort of agreed on rather a strict framework in which we could operate. And the core of this framework, that it had to be equivalent but different. So we needed to find a doctorate program that was different from the PhD, and at the same time being demanded by the market, by the labor market. And as Johanna already said, the labor market now is desperately in need of people that are able to operate in the complex societal problems and issues that we have. And as these problems get more and more complex, there's a need for higher education, a level 8 education, in terms of what we call learning to intervene in these complex practices. So the focus is not so much on creating research and new knowledge as it is for the candidates to learn to intervene in complex practices. For instance, if you have a problematic neighborhood where you need to have all these different actors working together in terms of social work and health and municipality, in those complex environments, there are a number of candidates that are now trying to work in those neighborhoods and trying to create new ways of working and creating new innovation. So that's an example of some of the doctoral programs and trajectories that are now running in this pilot. We started in 2023, so there are now about 100 candidates working in their first or second year, and we try to train them on the job. So each of them has a very specific concrete task and concrete position and a concrete problem to work on. And we try to teach them in 4 different roles. They need to grow themselves as a professional in their own profession. But they also need to bring in some sort of new innovation, a new way of working, a new technology into the field. At the same time, they need to not only bring this innovation into the field and write it down, but also create the right circumstances for this innovation to work. So they need to operate as a change agent. They bring about change in their own field of practice, but they do this on a level 8 way, in a methodological way. And finally, of course, there are also research activities that need to be done, but these are not to support science, but these are to support these change process and these innovation processes. So this is the way that we try to create something that is equivalent to what the research universities are doing, but at the same time different, and which is, I think, very much at the core of what we're good at as universities of applied sciences, because we have strong ties with practice, and we are always focusing on innovation in practice. Next slide, Michael. So the target group for this level 8 program is primarily professionals from industry and society. Of course, they must have completed their masters, but we also require them to have experience in practice. So most of them are not fresh master students. Most of them have work experience before they start this professional doctorate. Of course, we also have some US personnel, either teachers or researchers, but we aim for at least 50% professionals from industry or society. The project duration is 4 to 6 years, depending on whether it's full-time or part-time. And in each project, and by project I mean the project that a candidate is working on, there are one or more industry or societal partners involved, and they are also part of the supporting committee of this particular candidate. Next slide. The aim for the candidate is to not lock himself up in a ivory tower and do research for 4 years and then come up with results. No, this candidate is working in practice, trying to do short cycle iterative interventions, trying to improve local situations, trying to develop new innovations, and at the same time learning from the experience and creating new knowledge from that. It's a pilot study. There are, as said, 25 institutions now involved, and you might call it a joint degree. So there are 7 sectors, and in each sector, a number of universities of applied sciences are working together, giving the education, and in the end, providing the diploma. However, as it is a pilot, there's not yet a legal basis for the diploma. We're working on it in parallel. So the legal enshrinement is a parallel process, which means that at the moment we cannot guarantee that the current candidates will receive a diploma that is legally valid. But of course, we are very hopeful that this process will be successful and that at the end, we will have the doctoral rights for this doctoral program. Next slide. One thing we learned is, next slide, Michael, that we work in different sectors. For example, we have identified a number of themes: energy and sustainability, healthcare, well-being, arts and creative sector, leisure, tourism, and hospitality. And what we've learned is that each of these domains is different. So these domains are allowed to make changes to the basic plan and adopt it to their own needs, which means that some of them might be more research oriented, others might be more transformation oriented, some will be in the middle, and we are in a constant learning process together. What is the common denominator of these programs? So that's a very interesting and learnful experience. Michael, next slide. I think we've come to the end. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you to the 3 speakers for all that rich information. I think it's so much to take in. But we have one question so far, but I encourage other people to either put your hand up or to write a question in the chat. So we'll go to the first one, which is from Michal Kapicek, who's the Secretary General of the UDRES, European University Alliance. And his question is actually related to that because there's another participant, Oscars, who is also trying to put together joint programs in the alliances. And the question is given that there are differences in emphasis between the different countries, which has been very well explained by the 3 of you, how do you handle that, do you think, if in terms of cooperation between institutions in those different countries?
Shall I maybe respond
Dan.
first? Because in our case, the pilot program is set up along the lines of those 7 domains. So there's a strong need within the domain to work together. For example, in the art domain, there already has been a strong culture of cooperation between these institutions, but we sort of have formalized it by creating what we call a graduate network of institutions that collaborate together. And there's also a graduate committee that is sort of trying to steer all these initiatives. But we have a lot of different ways to exchange learnings and to cooperate our mutual activities.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Dan. Would anyone else like to, Michael or Johanna, respond to that before I go on to another question?
Yeah, actually, I don't really know whether I really got the question right, but here in Germany, we had a long phase of collaborative doctorates. And this was basically over a decade and a half where UASs were supposed to and also did usually collaborate in doctoral education, always research oriented. So, and also research doctorates, of course, with the universities, but there were different models around, but usually this the situation was that most of the research was conducted by the UASs. They also obtained the funding for research projects, but the degree awarding took place by the university, and this is currently somehow dissolving into a different setting. What we also have, since the UASs have the right to award doctorates, of course, we have ties with, so we also have a lot of industrial doctorates, of course, especially when it comes to UASs, which is also from a quality assurance point of view, of course, a challenge. What we see now is that, of course, the UASs are a new role, and now other institutions want to collaborate with us. And this is in a field that is developing right now, and I'm curious what the outcome will look like there.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think the question was more about cooperation between different UAS in different countries. With the European Universities Initiative now, there are joint programs. I know that several have got joint bachelor and master degrees, so I wonder, I don't know of any myself who have got yet from amongst the UAS community a joint doctorate, because, well, Finland, it's not there yet, but in those countries that have, for example, do you know of any joint doctorate program between the Netherlands and Germany at UAS, and how that is managed?
And I could answer from Finnish perspective that the European University Alliances are really important for the universities of applied sciences in the collaborative doctorate part. So I made a small survey last fall. I put the article link to the chat. So based on that, it is quite clear that Finnish universities of applied sciences look more for international university or universities of applied sciences partners than what they do in Finland. So it might be that our master students will go to the third cycle abroad and not to Finland. And I think that's partly a pity.
Okay. But yeah, I think to answer Mikael, it's a developing field. And I think it's actually quite safe to say that there probably aren't any joint professional doctorate programs in the alliances yet, given that this is so recent in the UAS and the initiative is also relatively new. But it's something to monitor. We have a few more questions in the Q&A, but we also have one hand up. So just to see if this works, I wonder whether we can give the opportunity to Alexandru to Salcianu to ask his question out loud. Are you there, Alexandru?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please tell us where you're from as well.
I am from the Technical University of Iași in Romania. As far as I know, we had that model of very good practices, the Technische Universität in Germany, Bayerische Technische Universität, Darmstadt Technische Universität. So, from this perspective, I would like to ask a precise question, mainly to Professor Gill. So, what is the real and the present place of the PhD supervisors? Because finally you award a doctoral diploma. So this doctoral diploma is in a specific domain, like let's say electrical engineering or mechanical or civil engineering, or this diploma is awarded in a larger domain, like let's say sustainability or something like this. I am really interested in this point, this topic. Thank you.
Yes, Alexandru, thank you for that question. I mean, the situation in Germany, when you look at the technical universities, they came up with this, I mean, basically they were like UASs are now, but more than 100 years ago, because they did not have the right to award doctorates. And at some point they came up with a new kind of degree, and that was the Doctor of Engineering, Dr. Ing in German. And that was a relatively new product on the market back then. Now this Doctor of Engineering now has, of course, is quite ubiquitous as a degree. Now, when it comes to the UASs now, they don't have a new degree and they don't have a domain specific. I mean, they're supposed to define domains, and they do, but they don't have domain focused degrees. But we also award in engineering a Doctor of Engineering, like the technical universities and some universities do. So we do have also a Doctor of Political Sciences. We have a Doctor in Natural Sciences. So basically the same degrees as the universities. So there's not one additional degree added here. So that is maybe, but at the same time, of course, the research is more interdisciplinary or non-monodisciplinary at UASs, but that also holds for the other universities so far, but maybe just to a lesser extent. So there, the research, the underlying research is more disciplinary, but the UASs are more interdisciplinary, but at the same time, they still award the same degrees. I hope that answers the question, if I got it right.
Thank you very much. Now it is very clear. For the very beginning, I was a bit confused upon this topic, because it's a quite different perspective versus the classical one. But now, for me, it's very clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alexandru. So we have questions in the chat here, and one of them from an anonymous attendee is whether the presenters could elaborate on the labour market demands that were cited as a background driver for the doctorates. So do you have any studies or any detail on this that can be cited?
Well, I could shortly answer that yes, there are any studies on that, and I could maybe write a couple of them in the chat, for instance. But there are, from what I checked my list, like labor market perspectives for PhD graduates in Europe, article published in 2022 with a large data collection. So yeah, I could share these so the participants could dive into this topic.
Okay, thank you. Please do, Johanna. Okay, so another one. There's one about Germany, but I'm going to leave to the end because we'd already sort of talked a lot about Germany in the previous question. So one is from Patricia Georgieva from Bulgaria, and the questions to all of you is, well, you can read it yourselves, but what are the main quality assurance and accreditation challenges? It's linked a bit to the question by Chris Stewart too, of experience in the process. I mean, you've had your ECAF presentation, of course, so maybe you can give a few insights from that.
Shall I take that question or?
Yeah, as you wish. Or
yeah, I mean, I can only speak for Germany, of course, but here it would. I mean, the main discussion was. I mean, this was almost 2 decades of discussions here in Germany, and we had one main issue was critical mass. So you might have some professors who are up to the task and who are strong researchers, but do you really have enough? Do you have the numbers to actually create a stable environment for early stage researchers and to accompany them in their trajectory of becoming to be awarded doctoral degree? And so this was about assembling a critical mass, and one quality assurance challenge always was to, okay, how do we define the domains? How many do we need in a domain? And there's also how many disciplines are allowed in that domain in terms of, well, if a domain is topic related, and Dan gave a few examples, which we also have in Germany in some cases, yeah, on one of his slides, yeah, energy and sustainability, for example. And the question is, okay, is this only electrical engineering and mechanical engineering, or is it also other disciplines? So this was always a question of how do we define this? And then in Germany right now, we have maybe another quality assurance aspect is that the degree awarding rights are given to a domain specific persons for a limited period of time. And we are in an experimental phase in Germany, despite it being legally enshrined, and we have an evaluation process. And this is external. This can be the Science and Humanities Council, can also be other external evaluators, but this will be assessed on a regular basis. So this is, so to speak, stricter and more rigid than what the traditional research universities face. But this is also due to the fact that we are basically new in the game. So there is a formal evaluation process here, which, by the way, is participatory in the sense of that UAS representatives are involved in this accreditation and evaluation process. So it's not the universities judging the UASs and whether they are up to the task. So this is done jointly. John, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm just wondering whether Dan and Johanna would like to come in on the QA question, or we can move on. It's okay, we can move on. And well, I mean, one of a related question, I would call it, from Chris Stewart is about the assessment of PhDs, obviously, well, professional doctorates in the different countries. You have traditionally you'd have a thesis or journal articles maybe as a way of assessing your PhD. How would this be done for a UAS doctorate? How would you assess the students?
Maybe I can say a little bit from the Dutch pilot. We felt that one sort of general exam would not be sufficient to cover the various demands in the various roles that we have identified. So we're working with the portfolio of evidence that the candidate is building during those 4 years. We also have developed a quality assurance program, which has been shared in the chat, by the way, by my colleague Frank. Each of the 7 domains has identified learning outcomes, and we are now in the process of translating those learning outcomes into a concrete assessment criteria for the end review. So it will, in most cases, will be a portfolio of evidence describing various roles and various activities and results of the candidates. And there will be a criterion-based interview at the end. And in many of the domains, there's a requirement that at least one of the publications is published in a scientific journal. But that's not the only assessment criteria. There's this whole portfolio that needs to show that you are working on the level 8 level.
And maybe that's included, Dan, in the information that was shared also in the chat. Yeah,
that's correct.
Okay, so we can look there. Okay, so back to Germany. It's there was a couple of questions, but one is interesting that I've never heard of it, but actually, in terms of the Union of Skills at the European level, policy now about more of an integration of different types of education. In that context, there's an interesting question about German level 8 qualification in higher vet. This is from Karen from Germany, and it would be, in your view, what would be the concrete difference between, let's say, any EQF level 8 qualification and UAS doctorates? Difficult question.
Yeah, actually, I think Dan would even be better in and has more experience in answering this kind of this dimension of the EQF8 spectrum. I mean, we have, and I think there was one comment from Ireland which said, okay, it's contribution to research, and we have contribution to practice, and I think that's basically the point here. So I think that the mainstream development for UASs is basically a contribution to applied research. So that is their focus, but this higher vet approach is more a contribution to practice. But if I'm informed correctly, this is still under development. So this is still being developed, and there's no final qualification description available yet, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But basically this is like as Dan pointed out in the, let me maybe switch to that slide. Like here, this is basically, if you look at the spectrum, this is about innovation. This is a contribution to practice. This is also at the forefront of innovative work contexts, and that I would, in my view, would be the difference here.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Couple of other short ones. I mean, we have touched on the issue of publishing in academic journal. It is part of it, but not in all programs. I think that's what we heard from Dan. But then another question would be finding external examiners capable of being involved in examining the students. And another question is on supervision. How is I guess these are in the joint programs. It's probably more towards joint with traditional universities. So there's a couple of questions there. One is about supervision, and the other is about examination.
In the Dutch context, both the supervision and examination is done by a committee comprised of both people from the university, 2 professors, and people from practice, 2 practice coaches or practice supervisors. And this guarantees that you have a dual perspective on the project and on the assessment. And there are some requirements towards their qualifications.
Excellent.
And in Germany, we do have, when it comes to supervision, this is done by the UASs. In the UAS doctorate, in terms of examination, we have, I mean, in Germany, we have the very special situation that traditionally the supervisors also examine, but this is perceived as somehow a development that we don't want to continue. And at the UASs do have an external examination. And here we are required to involve at least one colleague from a research university, traditional university. So the examination is a mixed affair, so to speak. So this is when it comes to, so this is also a quality assurance aspect, of course.
Okay, excellent. I mean, I'm going to go to the last question now because there's only one in the Q&A. Of course, people are very free and welcome to follow up with the speakers afterwards. And if you can't get in touch with them, of course, just contact the UASs Secretariat and we'll facilitate the contact. So the last question is from Ulla Priden, a board member of UASs from Estonia. And she is asking about the national perspective. I mean, it's a good way to end, I think, from starting off on and how things have developed in countries like Estonia that don't have doctoral programs at UAS yet. I don't know whether they will, but it's interesting to know for them how you managed the negotiations with your ministries. Who wants to start?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Because in our case, I think it has been quite a long process because we first needed to establish ourselves as a respective partner in terms of doing research. So that has taken almost 25 years until the ministry became not only interested, but very enthusiastic about the role of universities of applied sciences in the field of applied research and practice-based research. And that has sort of laid the foundation for our negotiations with the ministry. And then the main hurdle, in fact, were the research universities. So we have spent quite a lot of years talking with them and trying to find out a way to create a modus that would help both of us. And in the end, there was a breakthrough in 2019 when we came to a common agreement on how to approach this topic. And then the ministry was also no longer objecting. So that was, in our case, the main hurdle to take in recent years.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Germany or Finland like to respond to your national situation?
Would you like to go first, Michael? No. Okay. I think that in all cases that we've been looking into, it looks like, and this is not any kind of a real result, that in each country there has been a very strong and charismatic person from the UAS side to start the discussion and keep it going on with the ministry. This is well, not scientifically proven, but looks like that. And I think that the ministries, well, it really depends on their political agenda. And it's quite clear that in Finland, we will struggle for many coming years still. And when we have that particular government in the future, we will be successful probably in this. And I looked at the participant list and I saw that there was one representative from our ministry, but maybe not online anymore. So I would love to ask from her perspective. But I think that ministry has the problem that universities in each country have been opposing really much this this development, and then ministry needs to listen to both sides, and this is the tough thing. And Ulla asked also that could we share some best practices for countries who are interested in developing. This might be something that we could go on with this discussion of best practices in the Eurasia conference in Porto Alegre. So we will have Dan, Michael, and me. We will have a session on Wednesday there in this topic. So please welcome there.
Okay, thank you, Johanna. Michael, do you want to finish?
Yes, of course, I could elaborate on this for hours, but just a few highlights from the German discussion here. We had private universities becoming eligible to award doctorates, meeting criteria that the UASs could easily have satisfied. So that was somehow a mismatch in the system. So that was one driver. Another driver was a decision by the Constitutional Court of Germany stating that the UAS professor is, in terms of freedom of research, by no means different from a university professor. So this was also basically legal underpinning for differentiation somehow broke away in 2010. And apart from that, just as Johanna just pointed out, in the state of Hesse, there was in the ministry, there were usually you deal with legal people with legal background, with a university background there, but there we had people with a UAS background, and they also initiated that in the state of Hesse, that process. Other issues were permeability, so there were UAS graduates who could not move on. Then the universities were supposed to open up. So they were required to, well, since they held a monopoly, so this was a central argument, since they hold a monopoly on awarding doctoral rights, they were supposed to open up, and somehow they didn't for various reasons. So this somehow led to the situation that there was not really a justification for UASs not becoming eligible to award doctorates. That is the situation that we have now. But we do both. We do collaborative doctorates with the universities, and we have in specified domains our own.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. A good way to finish. So, I mean, I would like to conclude now, and that would be simply to thank you very much, Johanna, Michael, and Dan, for your input to this subject that clearly has a lot of interest. I think we had almost we had 130 participants at some point, which must be a record for a UASI webinar. So, underlines the interest in the subject. And just as a way of taking this forward, I would say, you mentioned the conference, but of course we also have community of practice for UASI members. And I think the research community of practice, which meets again online on the 4th of April. For those who are tuning in for members, I think we'll discuss this webinar then about how we can take the subject forward. It touches on our community of practice for quality assurance too, and we'll be briefing that community on what we've discussed today. There is an Erasmus Plus project currently being evaluated, so we fingers crossed for that, because that will certainly help. This webinar is on YouTube, in case you missed it, all of it. You had it on the background, but you want to go through it again or to send it to colleagues. So that's it. Have a fantastic Tuesday lunchtime and rest of the day. Please.
Today is Monday.
Is it Monday? Oh my God! It's Monday. That's how that's how quick the week seems to be going. And keep in touch. Thank you for attending, and goodbye.